Hello and welcome, I'm Darren, and today we are going to talk about upscalers. So I'm probably a bit late on the bandwagon for this one. I thought I'd kind of get as much, listen to as much information. I didn't really want to jump on it in the first place, but I've made some decisions from it. So PS5 Pro was announced. And the biggest thing that I took from the PS5 Pro in the way of the biggest upgrade to PS5 Pro would have been PSSR. So obviously it looks like a far better upscaler, and upscaler's very important. Obviously I talk about it a lot on this channel. I play at 4K, so upscalers for me are important at 4K. You're gonna need them, and certainly on a PlayStation you're gonna need them. Now I'm gonna guess that the regular PS5 uses upscalers pretty heavily. I know it's not just what the PS5 will use. I know obviously they're not going to be. People will constantly compare it. This is where it gets like really dumb really quick, where obviously your typical kind of PlayStation, or nah, it's probably not fair for me to say your typical PlayStation, because I'm sure those guys have half a brain, but some of the over the top, probably uninformed, or I don't even know how to explain it. Obviously there are people that will compare a benchmark of a 4090 in a 4K ultra settings native benchmark and compare the FPS output to a PlayStation. Like, that's a fucking pretty high level of dumb. How anyone would think that a 200 watt complete TDP console is going to outcompete a 400 watt on its own GPU is an incredible chain of thought. So the biggest thing, obviously, for me is with the upscalers, having a good upscaler, certainly at 4K, will allow you to use more aggressive upscaling. So we see that kind of difference between FSR and DLSS. So obviously, FSR at 4K quality, certainly like in a game that it works well, can look very good, and DLSS quality at 4K generally 9 out of 10 times looks very good. Obviously if it's the newest ones, we're still playing games now that still have a very old DLSS in, like I think Red Dead Redemption 2 and stuff like that still has a very outdated version of DLSS. It still looks alright, but I haven't modded it. I should probably try and mod in one of the newer versions. I haven't yet, but I'd imagine it'll make quite a big difference. But without getting too off topic, generally with DLSS you can drop to 4K balanced and it will still hold a very good picture, sometimes not much distinguishable between either native or quality. And sometimes you can drop down to performance and it will still look very good. Now FSR normally drops off quite considerably at balanced, and by the time you get to performance you've got quite a big drop off. So obviously with PSSR, I would imagine that will allow, if it's good and if it's anywhere near the quality of DLSS, you're going to be able to use a higher, a more aggressive upscale. So you're going to probably be able to drop down to those balanced or even those performance modes and still maintain a very good picture quality. Certainly for what a console would be. And obviously then with consoles, you're using, the games are optimized for the consoles, and I kind of think that probably some of them are optimized in a way that a PC is possibly not able to copy. And the main reason for that is there's a lot of talk, obviously, about the ray tracing on the PlayStation 5 and obviously the improved ray tracing on the PlayStation 5 Pro. But I believe they use a certain mix or only certain ray tracing implementations. So it might just be reflections, or it might just be shadows in certain games. Now, on PC, you don't always get those options available. Sometimes your options are ray tracing on or off, or ray tracing high, medium, or low. Now, that doesn't generally give you the choice of choosing either reflections and turning off shadows and etc. etc. So PlayStation are able to optimize their games for their console in a way that is probably quite hard for a PC to copy. So comparing them in that way is obviously quite awkward. And then plus the PlayStation, in some maybe lower games, depending on what they are, or should I say less demanding games, depending on what they are, they might be able to run 4K high settings or something like that. I don't know. But obviously, most of the time in the games, they're not running the ultra settings, which you will see used for benchmarks. It's not very often that you're going to go online and look at a benchmark. Certainly like what you'll get on like their Tech Power website or something like that, they'll always just run the ultra settings. Now benchmarks are starting to use upscalers in their benchmarks. They're starting to use frame generation in their benchmarks. So we are starting to see an adaptation on benchmarks, but for the most part, they will generally run each resolution at the highest preset available. So it might be ultra, it might be cinematic. A lot of these quality settings are not what you're going to see on the PlayStation. Now, they might use a mixture of medium, highs, lows, whatever it is. And that's something that we're going to be looking at. So the other thing that obviously came from the PlayStation announcement was pretty much in time, made sense, was FSR4. So FSR4, the AI upscaler for AMD. Now, this is long overdue. I've said this since I purchased the AMD GPU. It is the biggest letdown. Forget ray tracing. The biggest letdown for the AMD GPU is FSR. People can argue it whatever they want. It doesn't matter to me because I have both. I can see it for myself. It is there for me to see, and it has been the reason why I will choose the NVIDIA GPU over the AMD GPU. That's my personal choice. People don't have to agree. People will say they will only play it native. Good luck to them. And people will say they don't see any difference. People will say FSR is better. None of that matters to me. What matters to me is what I see with my own eyes. And for the most part, FSR lets down the AMD GPU. If it didn't, they wouldn't be fucking changing it. It's as simple as that. You cannot better something that is as good as what people keep saying it is. It's not as good as what people make it out to be. Now, that's not the case in every game. In some games, it's actually very good. But in a lot of games, it's not. Now, I'm not saying it's terrible and it's not unusable. I've just played through Black Myth Wukong. Funny enough, I've got a 4080 and a 7900 XTX, and I was too lazy to swap over systems that are in two different rooms. I was running the XTX. I downloaded the game on both, and I honestly just couldn't be bothered. I just wanted to play the game, and it was a game that kind of gripped me enough that the actual visuals, or like nitpicking on visuals, didn't bother me enough. Now, for some games where the gameplay isn't great, so a lot of what draws me in is the visuals, it might have bothered me a bit more, and it might have been enough for me to swap over the systems so that I could enjoy the game a bit more with DLSS compared to the FSR. But at the same time, DLSS in that game, or that game has a problem on all of the upscalers where it looks over sharpened, and unfortunately, I don't know why. They just didn't put a sharpening. If they had a sharpening slider, oh, fuck me, that would make a big difference. So even with at 4K in like the cinematic settings or whatever with DLSS, it does look very sharp. With FSR, it looks very sharp, and with the others, it looks so. It's just an over sharpened looking game now. Whether they mean for it to look like that, I don't know. Whether that's some sort of artistic style, who knows? It's my only nitpick in visuals in that game. So I played through that game on FSR. So I'm not going to say, oh my god, FSR is dog shit. You cannot use it. It is terrible. That's not the case at all. But for the most part, there's a lot of games that I have played where I've started playing on the XTX, and there's a lot of your anti-aliasing shimmer, and it does affect me. I'll be honest, I notice it straight away. I will start to, if it's in a game and it's quite bad, I do start to feel my kind of a headache and stuff like that. And I do notice I don't get that same kind of, I don't get that happen with DLSS. I'm not saying if I was playing the game for like 5 or 6 hours, it wouldn't happen. But certainly I notice it. It's just one of those things that affects me. I know it affects some people, and I know some people just don't care or don't even notice it. But for me, it is something that the shimmering and anti-aliasing, if it's bad, it's very noticeable. And I do find it does kind of affect me a bit. So FSR4 is needed for AMD. Now, obviously, how this comes about is going to be very interesting. How it compares to PSSR is going to be very interesting. I've seen a lot of people saying that PSSR and FSR4 will be the same thing. Now, I've no doubt that they've had some crossover in how they've been made. Whether they will be the same thing, that is, I don't know. I think it would be hard for PlayStation to market. I mean, people know that obviously PlayStation uses AMD tech. People know that Xbox use AMD tech, and people know that a lot of the handhelds, so your, I assume like your Asus ROG Ally and your Legion and those, I think pretty much all of those handhelds use AMD tech. So for PlayStation to actually put a name on an upscaler that is nothing that is specifically for them, I'm not sure how that works. Because effectively, when the next generation of Xbox launches that also uses AMD upscaling, is that using PSSR? If so, how does that work? Do you know what I mean? So my own thoughts is PlayStation would have probably, even if they've used FSR4, they have adapted it themselves in a certain way to be able to use the PSSR naming tech. I could be wrong, but that doesn't mean that FSR4 will not be good. I'd imagine that there's every reason that it could be very good. Now, how it's going to come to us is the next interesting thing. Now, we've heard for quite a long time about obviously AMD not going high end. We've heard about the 8800 XT, which is obviously the naming or the guesswork of the naming of the next GPU. I don't know if that's a 100% cert. Now, that GPU for a long time has been mentioned with having a improved upscaler and improved ray tracing. So you can imagine that this GPU will be utilizing FSR4. So PSSR is ready. PlayStation PS5 Pro is shipping with PSSR, and it's coming imminently. So is FSR4 ready? We obviously don't have it. Now, are they saving it for the 8800 XT or for the entire next lineup of, I can't remember the naming schemes for AMD. Basically, the 8000 series, whatever that is, Navi, God knows what, Navi 41, 42, I don't know. So the 8000 series, is FSR4 going to be only for the 8000 series? Is it going to be usable on the 7000 series? We know we do have AI cores on the 7000 series now. I don't think we do on the 6000 series. So how do AMD go about this? And I was kind of thinking, like, AMD are probably in a little bit of an awkward situation here. I honestly did think, with the latest release of games being kind of ray tracing, I'm not going to say baked into them, but very much adapted into those games and a big selling feature of those games, I honestly thought that the 8000 series would have launched by now. I thought it would launch in mind with those games without having a big uplift on ray tracing as being, advertised. Not advertised as such, but obviously leaked. The big leaks are that it's going to have an improvement in ray tracing, and obviously we've seen an improvement, or we're hearing about a big improvement in ray tracing on the PS5 Pro AMD tech. So it kind of makes sense. But they didn't. And that surprised me. Now, I hope to God that AMD aren't going to do, with missing these game launches, I hope it doesn't mean that AMD are going to sit on this GPU now until NVIDIA release something along the lines of a 5070, which I'd imagine will go against the 8800 XT, just to see what NVIDIA launch it price-wise, to then make a decision on how they are going to launch. I hope they don't do that. I don't see how, like, the only way to me that makes sense at the moment is that AMD haven't released it now, or even advertised it for release now, because either A, they have way too much 7000 series on the shelf that they need to sell first. B, they know that if the upscaler will only work on 8000 series, the 7000 series left on the shelf at the moment are doomed. Because obviously if this GPU does drop at a very competitive price, they'd have to drop even like the XTX and stuff to a ridiculous price to be able to sell it. And even then, people would probably be swaying towards wanting the better upscaler and the better RT performance. I don't know how they'd actually sell 7000 series. If an 8800 XT releases between $500 and $600 at very close to XTX performance, but with an upscaler that can't be used on the XTX and better ray tracing performance, the XTX to me at that point is almost unsellable. Like, you have to drop it down to $300, and even then people would probably think, I might just pay the extra money for the better upscaler. So there's that. Or if they are releasing the 8800 XT that competitively priced, then you're going to have something like a 8700 XT. 8700 XT and below that would still outperform a PlayStation 5 Pro. And those GPUs would probably be around $400, maybe even lower. So if they were to release those now, would they hurt the sales of the PlayStation 5 Pro? I don't know. Are there people on lower end GPUs at the moment, like your lower end, like you say your 4060s or your, I don't know, 7600 XTs, 7700 XTs, that are thinking, do I upgrade or do I buy a PS5 Pro at the promise that it looks amazing as what it's advertised to be. Now, we're pretty sure that it'll probably fall a little bit short when we actually see it in truth. But I'm not slagging off consoles. Consoles are amazing for the money. So I'm not an anti-console person. Consoles have their pluses that PC can't do, and PC have its pluses that consoles can't do. And that's it. There's no argument in it. That is the way it is. Now, I'd prefer a PC because it gives me the freedom that I want. I don't want to be tied into the restrictions of console. Some people don't feel like they have restrictions because it gives them everything that they want and need. So for those respects, a console is ideal for them. It's just not for me. So there's a lot going on there, and I'm not sure which way it's going to go, because I thought we would have had some announcement by now on the 8000 series from AMD themselves. Now, whether something comes, I mean, the PS5 Pro has, obviously, it's been announced. It has a release date. There is nothing announced. And we know that NVIDIA have now announced that the 4090s are no longer in production. So you know that NVIDIA are gearing up. Now, NVIDIA will, I'm pretty sure, they'll do what they've done every other time. I don't think anything will change. They will be selling the 5090 and probably the 5080. Those will come first, and it will probably be a couple of months behind until we get something like the 5070. Now, whether AMD wait for the 5080 and go by the pricing of the 5080 to imagine what the 5070 will be priced at, and then decide to release the 8800 XT in between. So basically reacting to the 5080 price and trying to get the jump on the 5070, that might be the case. And that might have given them enough time to allow the PlayStation 5 Pro to sell through the Christmas New Year period, and hopefully for them maybe get rid of some of the stock that they have in the way of the 7000 series that's still pretty much available everywhere. So I would imagine there's still quite a lot of that about. Maybe that's the reason. But what would be interesting is, do we have to, if that's the case, if PSSR is available, FSR4 isn't, or is it? Will we see it on the 7000 series, or will we only see it launched for the 8000 series? Will it be launched to incentivize, will it be used as a feature to sell the 8000 series even though it will be backwards compatible? Or will it be used as a selling point for the 8000 series because it isn't backwards compatible? What do AMD do in that respect? Now, who knows? If it's not backwards compatible, and there's a chance that it could be, we're going back to NVIDIA frame generation from 3000 to 4000 series. Obviously, there's a lot of argument that frame generation could have been used on the 3000 series. Did NVIDIA just basically do it to upsell the next product? Let's face it, every company does that. And every company needs to do that, because if you don't do it as a company, you don't survive. No company is ever going to make you the perfect device and say, we're selling you this now, and then we're closing the shop once it's sold because we can't make a product that's better than it. It's always the way it has to be. If AMD don't do it, will the 8000 series sell enough that everyone from the 6000 or so, I think probably the 8000 series will definitely be compelling to people that are still on the 6000 series. Is it enough for people on the 7000 series to shift over? So for instance, I have an XTX. If FSR4 is really good and it works on the XTX, I doubt I'll buy an 8000 series GPU. I'll probably buy one to test. Why not? Especially if it's at a decent price. I'll probably buy one to test. But if I wasn't doing that in a YouTube perspective, I probably wouldn't buy one. So there's a lot for AMD to work out on this, I think, especially if they want to get ahead of NVIDIA. So with all that said, I've seen obviously all the PlayStation 5 Pro stuff going around. I've seen the comparisons. Now, the comparisons are really awkward because it is AMD tech. And for that reason, when you look at the PlayStation games, when they go up against NVIDIA, once they're PC ported, so the PlayStation games PC ported AMD to NVIDIA, they generally run better on AMD hardware. But with the new upscaler, which DLSS is normally better than FSR, and the ray tracing improvement, it's probably more comparable to what NVIDIA have on the market at the moment until the 8000 series GPUs are released. So when the 8000 series GPUs are released, I'd imagine you might have something like a 8600 XT, which would probably be which will probably be a lot more closely comparable to a PS5 Pro, but we don't have that at the moment. So I see a lot of people talking about the 4070. So I have a 4070. I've hijacked it from my daughter's PC. She's using her school laptop at the moment. She's only playing Roblox at the moment, so she's playing that on the laptop. It's sat in her computer. It's not really getting that much use. So I have hijacked her 4070. And I've thrown it into my wife's PC that I built for her to be able to work at home. She had her own dedicated PC because it needed certain stuff on it. She doesn't need that anymore. She's changed roles, so she can use my PC if she wants to work from home, because all she has to do now is log into an online platform, whereas beforehand she needed dedicated software and dedicated antivirus and all of the stuff that she needed. So her PC was sat around doing nothing, and the 4070 in my daughter's GPU was playing Roblox. She didn't need it. She can run on the iGPU. So I've thrown it into a system, or I've thrown the 4070 into my wife's system, which was running with no GPU. And I'm going to run some games on the 4070 on the 4K monitor, and we're going to see how we can get them to perform at 4K, because the 4070, I thought the 4070 was a great card. Now, obviously, it was bettered by the 4070 Super. It was obviously constantly in comparison to the 7800 XT. The 7800 XT is a more powerful card. The 7800 XT draws more power. What I thought was brilliant about the 4070 when I got it. Now, I did have a 3080 Ti in the last generation. I still have it now, actually. It's down there in a water-cooled system. I bought the 4070 because it was relatively cheap, and I thought it was an amazing GPU. And the reason was it got very close to the power of the 3080 Ti, but at drawing like less than 200 watts. Now, a lot of people don't care about that or gave it no credit for that. I actually thought that that was damn impressive. Obviously, for the people that don't care about that type of thing, it means nothing to them. But for me, I thought, this is impressive. This is a very small GPU with a very low TDP for a GPU, which is actually punching a lot above its weight. It is a 70 class GPU. It's not aimed at 4K gaming, so it will drop behind the 3080 Ti because it does have that memory bandwidth at 4K. But at the same time, it doesn't always drop that far behind. It will be limited at 4K by VRAM in some games, but at the same time, we're probably going to have to drop settings anyway. So we're going to start running. Basically, we're going to start comparing this towards what we're getting from a console. We're going to make this. We're going to try to make this work. So we're not going to be running everything at ultra settings. We're going to figure out what settings we can run it at. So that might be 4K medium. It might be 4K medium with a high or mixed load. It might be some certain ray tracing depending on what we have available. We're not comparing this GPU to another PC. We're comparing this GPU, or we're using this GPU. So we're not even comparing it to a console or the PlayStation 5 Pro, but what we are using is kind of... We're going to use the figures that the PlayStation 5 Pro is projected at. And we're going to see how we can make that work with a 4070. And effectively, yes, how it does compare. Can we hit 60 FPS in a lot of these games? And can we hit more? Where can we push it? Now, the other thing that we will probably do is we will use the advantage of it being a PC. So we don't have subscriptions. We have Steam. We're not restricted to just PlayStation games, but we will run some. Now, unfortunately, I am region locked, so that's a bit of a nightmare. I can't play all of the PlayStation games. I can't even download the new God of War Ragnarok. I can play the old God of War. I might download it. Annoyingly, I missed the boat on the sale the other day. I don't think they put up a date of how long the sale was going to be on, which is really annoying. So they had a big PlayStation library sale the other day, and I set this PC up and I thought, right, I'm going to go over and buy some of those games, and they're not on fucking sale anymore. Sod's law. So anyway, this is dragging on, but I will try and swing this system over the mic without smashing everything. Just a quick look. So this is what we will be using. We are in the... Ooh, we're getting blinded by the light there. We are in the Fractal Terra case. We are using the 4070 Founders GPU, which I love this GPU. I think it's really cool. I love Founders GPUs. They're a bit of a nightmare because they have that blow-through cooler, which sometimes... As you can see, this one's blown straight into the power supply. But I believe the power supply can then draw it out and pull it out through the other way, so it kind of works in this case. And a lot of small form factor cases are designed to run with the NVIDIA GPUs because generally they're made to fit in small form factor cases, which is something AMD need to think about. Now, I know it's only a small market, but it's still quite an important market. I think a lot of people would use SFF more if stuff was more available. So obviously, as you can see, CPU that side. So we are using a 11600K because that's what I have. Now, that is more powerful than than the CPU that will be in the PlayStation or the PlayStation 5 Pro. I don't have a comparison. Now, because the 11600K is, in that case, running a very low profile cooler, I will probably downclock it a bit. So hopefully it's not too far off the 36 or 3700 AMD CPU, 3600X, 3700, whatever it is. I think the 11600K is a fair bit more powerful than that. But we will be thermally... what's the word for it? What's the word I'm looking for? We will be thermally restricted by that case, so we are not going to get the full power of the 11600K anyway. But regardless, we'll run it. We'll run some games at 4K. Like I said, this isn't a GPU that's designed for 4K. This is a 1440p GPU or a high FPS 1080p GPU. I mean, it's going to do 1440p well, but 4K is, I mean, 4K is a push for anything. unless you are obviously using upscalers certainly quite aggressively. How aggressively we're going to have to use on this, I don't know. It depends what settings we get and how they scale compared to what games we're playing. But I've rabbled now for 35 minutes, so I'm going to leave it there. If you're interested in this, cool. Maybe think about subscribing. If you enjoyed the video and you've watched it till this far, I appreciate that. If you give it a like, I'd appreciate it even more. And I will catch you in the next one.